Look, we all make mistakes. You make mistakes, I make mistakes, the Doctor makes mistakes. Still, it's not often you hear the cast and crew actually acknowledge the things that went wrong with the show, but sometimes they do. I'm Ellie for Who Culture here with 10 Doctor Who mistakes confirmed by the creators. Number 10. Clara being too passive. Companions are meant to evolve during their time in the TARDIS. As the 13th Doctor tells her fam in Arachnids in the UK, you're not gonna come back as the same people that left here. Rarely has this been quite as true as with Clara. The Clara of Series 7 is almost a completely different character to the Clara of Series 8 and 9. This radical reinvention was largely down to the Impossible Girl arc, which dominated her first run of adventures. Making the companion the series arc was an interesting idea on paper, but in practice it created problems, as Steven Moffat has admitted. He said one of the difficulties with her Impossible Girl story was that she wasn't actually a participant in it, because she didn't actually know about the mystery. It was always the Doctor fussing about it. She was completely oblivious until the very end, so it doesn't change her hugely. Moffat adjusted in Series 8 and made Clara a much more active character going forward, though some would argue that he overcorrected. I would be one of those people. Number 9. Susan's squandered potential. As the Doctor's first on-screen companion, Susan holds a special place in Doctor Who history. She was also his granddaughter and an alien in her own right, but sadly this is something the writers quickly seem to forget. Following a promising introduction in An Unearthly Child, Susan was treated more as a human teenager than a Time Lord, playing second fiddle to the other leads. It's a great frustration looking back, not least for the woman who played her. Reflecting on her decision to leave the series, Carol Ann Ford recalled that it had become so repetitive. For a large part of the time, Susan was arriving somewhere with her grandfather and the other two being told not to get into danger, having them come and get her out of danger, then flying off again. In the meantime, I was watching visiting actors do really interesting stuff. Ford wanted Susan to be a much more interesting character. She came to the show as a trained dancer, acrobat, swimmer, and horse rider, but was given no opportunity to use these talents in the script. She was also told Susan would have telepathic powers and a cool wardrobe, neither of which happened. Given that was 60 years ago, it's probably too late to make amends, though who knows what the future holds. This is Doctor Who after all. Number 8. Redacting Wild Blue Yonder. Speculation for the 60th specials was dominated by the mysterious middle installment, Wild Blue Yonder. This was a deliberate move from Russell T Davies, who wanted to take one of the episodes and, quote, try to reveal nothing about it. This approach extended to all aspects of promotion, with trailer clips obscured by static and redacted text and 3 redacted actors in the cast list. But did it work? Well, that depends on who you ask. The secrecy did successfully preserve the plot and the villains. However, it also allowed fans to get carried away with their own theories, with many convinced that past Doctors and companions would appear. Even Russell T Davies is conflicted. He explained to the official Doctor Who podcast, "This is actually the simplest one of the lot. That's why I kept it secret, but I wonder if that's had an unfortunate effect and made it disappointingly simple." Ultimately, he had the right idea, but some of the marketing was still needlessly secretive. Did Isaac Newton and Mrs. Merridew, characters who don't appear beyond the pre-titles, really merit the redacted treatment? Perhaps we'll be able to appreciate the mavity of this decision one day, but as it stands, we're not convinced. Number 7. Hiding the Daleks. Resolution was a new type of festive special, not so much a coda to Series 11 as a second finale. Chris Chibnall would be the first to admit that Series 11's actual finale was fairly lackluster. The version of the Battle of Ranskor Avkolos that went before cameras was actually a first draft. He told Doctor Who magazine in 2022, "I really attacked Resolution, so hopefully I made up for it with that one." Many would agree, but there was one thing that fans took issue with: the fact that the Daleks were completely absent from the marketing. Instead, promotion focused mostly on Jodie Whittaker's scarf. This allowed the reveal of the Dalek to be a surprise, but it also meant that the episode potentially lost whole swathes of viewers by not showing it off ahead of broadcast. Even Chibnall concedes that this might not have been the best strategy. He said, "We were torn between keeping it a secret or not, and I'm not sure that we got that call right." Thankfully, Revolution of the Daleks put the villains front and center in the marketing. It was a have your cake and eat it approach, allowing the defense drones to make a splash without detracting from the episode they appeared in. Win-win. Number 6. 4 to Doomsdays Froggy Failings. 4 to Doomsday saw the 5th Doctor go up against new foes, the Abankans, but not everyone was convinced by how they came across on screen, cast and crew included. Stratford Johns, who played their leader, Monarch, had initially leapt at the chance to play an evil space frog, feeling that it would help him overcome typecasting. But when he was presented with a solid masterwear, Johns refused on the grounds that it would limit his performance. In one interview, he recalled phoning the director and saying, "If you've got ideas like that, why don't you get another fat actor? If nobody can recognize me, there's no point paying my money." As As a compromise, a thin latex mask was agreed upon, but even then Johns was disappointed, believing he looked unrecognizable. Meanwhile, writer Terence Dudley had different reservations about the Abankans. Having envisaged the creatures as completely frog-like rather than humanoids with frog heads, he was dismayed with how they were depicted, later describing the story as a, quote, travesty. Sadly, Dudley died long before It Takes You Away was broadcast, but on that basis, we're sure he would have been delighted by the Solitrak's ultimate form. Johns, not so much. Number 5, Series 9 Stale Opener. In a show that's been going as long as Doctor Who, it's important to offer jumping on points for new viewers, usually by introducing new leads. In recent years, almost every series has abided by this logic, and in fact, on only 4 occasions has a main cast been carried over in its entirety. Series 6, Series 7, Series 9, and Series 12. Series 6 and 12's openers had different unique selling points by way of overseas shoots. Series 7's first chapter also featured scenes shot abroad, plus every Dalek ever. It also technically saw new companion Clara make her debut, which leaves Series 9 as something of an outlier. The trailers had quite literally promised the same mold, just the Doctor and Clara Oswald in the TARDIS, with no new characters to look forward to. Even the return of Davros wasn't publicised in advance. Steven Moffat has since admitted that this was a mistake, recalling that, I quote, "I feel as though I slightly fumbled it by not having a new thing." This is one of the reasons Series 10 ended up being so new, despite being Moffat's last. It's also why he opted to introduce Bill in the pilot rather than the 2016 Christmas special. Number 4, RTDs Shelved sequel. Russell T Davies's first era as showrunner saw at least one classic villain return each year. In 2005, we had the Autons and the Daleks. In 2006, we had the Cybermen. In 2007, we had the Makra and the Master. In 2008, we had the Sontarans and Davros, and in 2007, we had Rassilon and the Time Lords. But as RTD has since lamented, he never wrote an out-and-out classic series sequel, as Chris Chibnall did for the Silurians and Steven Moffat did for the Great Intelligence. I'd have run the old episodes on BBC 3 all week, then shown the sequel on the Saturday, he said in 2020, citing 1977's Image of the Fendal as a story ripe for revisiting. He said, "Imagine, Return of the Fendal, back in the ruins of Fetch Priory, ancient evil stirs. Wanda Ventham reincarnated. I was so determined not to look back too much, I think I missed a trick there." Of course, it's entirely possible that Return of the Fendal or another sequel will become a reality in Russell's second era. The Fendal could even be the boss or the one who waits. You heard it here first, folks, just in case it happens. Number 3, the sitcomnog. Series 5 is rightly heralded as one of Steven Moffat's best, but there's one scene that sticks out like a sore thumb: the end of Flesh and Stone when Amy kisses the Doctor. It's not the first time the companion has kissed the Doctor, but in most other cases the circumstances were different. There was a plot reason, as was the case for Martha and Donna, or an implied romance with the Doctor to begin with for Rose and Astrid. Flesh and Stone gives us something different: a companion forcing herself onto the Doctor, in her bedroom, on the night before her wedding, to another man. It wasn't exactly a great scene to begin with, but it's aged terribly, and even Moffat agrees, citing it on more than one occasion as his single biggest misstep. "I played it for sitcom-style laughs," he admitted to Doctor Who magazine, "and it doesn't work. Brilliant episode up till that point, and then I screw it up with sniggering sex comedy. It rankles me to this day," he said in another interview, "because it's just wrong." I'd say this is one to fix in the novelisation, if he ever does one. Number 2, the plasmaton problem. There's nothing worse than an unconvincing monster, and the plasmatons rank as one of the most unconvincing of all. They were envisaged as powerful amorphous henchmen, and the whole point of the costume was to hide the human shape, but they were blatantly just men in suits. No thought was given to the actors' eye lines either, so they couldn't move independently, save for the odd bit of lumbering. As the big bads of the Fifth Doctor's first finale, they failed spectacularly, a fact the man himself is under no illusion about. They were just nothing at all, Peter Davison recalled. It was just one more indignity that was heaped upon the story. It was a real symbol that the BBC had run out of money. What can we do for these plasmatons? Let's just make them lumps of polystyrene. It's a trend that continued in the Fifth Doctor's other finales, with the execution of Chameleon and the Magma Beast also leaving a lot to be desired. However, the Caves of Androzani featured one of the show's most enduring villains in the form of Sharaz Jek. Every cloud, I guess. Number 1, Matt Smith's regeneration regrets. When Peter Davison was cast as the Doctor, Patrick Troughton advised him to do no more than 3 seasons in the part. It's an unwritten rule that generally sticks, as was the case when Matt Smith exited after Series 7. Steven Moffat has since revealed that Series 8 was pitched as an 11th Doctor run, with many of the same elements present, the Doctor questioning if he was a good man, and some other characters, i.e. Missy, trying to tempt him to a darker path. It's not known how far these plans got or how how late in the day Matt Smith confirmed his intentions. Whatever the case, there was a feeling that the time of the Doctor was a slightly lackluster end to the 11th Doctor's era, and that certain plot points were wrapped up rather hurriedly, and the man himself would seem to agree. Was it the best episode it could be? Smith said in an interview. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I was proud of the body of work up to that point, but I think everything can always be better. Is this him throwing shade at the time of the Doctor, or something more? An admission that he should have stayed for that 4th series after all? Either way, he seems less than satisfied with his Doctor's ending. Well, you know how to fix that, Matt Smith. Come back in a cameo role. Come back in a cameo role. Did anyone else hear that? And there you have it. Make sure you also check out 10 times Doctor Who reused footage and hoped you wouldn't notice. In the meantime, I've been Ellie for Who Culture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.